Hi, welcome to Nagesh Botany online classes. Now I am going to explain an important topic that is cell theory. Cell theory, otherwise known as cell doctrine theory. Now we are going to learn about the scientists who proposed cell theory. So the first 1838, a scientist, Matthias Schleiden. Matthias Schleiden was a German botanist. He observed various different types of plants and their cells. So the Matthias Schleiden first time what he observed, different types of plants and their cells observed by Matthias Schleiden for the first time. So the next 1839, so the one more scientist, that scientist Theodor Schwann. Theodor Schwann in 1839, what he observed, various different types of animal cells observed by the Theodor Schwann. But Schwann also he said that all animals, so they are made up of cells. Outer boundary wall of the animal cells, that is plasma membrane. Plasma membrane is present around animal cells, that is observed by Theodor Schwann. He observed various different types of animals and their cells observed, and every cell consisting outer boundary wall is, that is plasma membrane. One more important point about Theodor Schwann. I am talking about Theodor Schwann only. So Theodor Schwann, he also said that plant cells, so here plant cells, that all plant cells, they consist of outer boundary wall. Plant cells outer boundary wall is cell wall. So presence of cell wall, that is a unique feature of plants. That statement given by Theodor Schwann. Here Theodor Schwann observed various different types of animals and their cells. He said that animal cells are enclosed by plasma membrane. So as well as the Theodor Schwann only confirmed that plant cells outer boundary wall is cell wall. That is a unique feature of the plant cells. This statement also given by Theodor Schwann. Next, Theodor Schwann, he also proposed, I am talking about Schwann only. Schwann, he also proposed a hypothesis. He also proposed a hypothesis that all plants and animals, they are made up of cells and as well as products of cells. That is given by the Schwann scientist only. He proposed, I am talking about Schwann, Theodor Schwann. He proposed hypothesis that all plants and animals, they are made up of cells and as well as products of cells. That is the hypothesis proposed by Schwann. Now, Schleiden and Schwann both together proposed cell theory. But here cell theory proposed by two scientists, that is Matthias Schleiden and Theodor Schwann. These two scientists together proposed cell theory. According to cell theory, they are given few important points in the cell theory. So there are first 2 points about cell theory. Cell is structural unit. For every organism, every living being, that may be plant or animal, cell is structural unit. Then second point, cell is basic unit of life. And as well as third point, cell is functional unit of life. Functional unit. There are 3 important statements given by Sladen and Swan. Cell is structural unit for every living being, functional unit for every living being, and it is a basic, simple unit for every organism, that may be plant or animal. Now, the main demerit of cell theory which is proposed by Slide and Swan, how cells are formed, that is not given by the Slide and Swan. How cells are formed, how new cells are formed, that information it is not given by Slide and Swan. So but in 1855, that is here I am going to explain about here modern cell theory, that is which is proposed by Rudolf. The modern cell theory that is proposed by Rudolf Virchow. In 1855, a scientist, Rudolf Virchow, he modified the cell theory. Already cell theory proposed by Slide and Swan, but slightly modified by Rudolf Virchow. So in exam, the following scientists modified the cell theory means Rudolf Virchow. You have to choose the option Rudolf Virchow. So Rudolf Virchow, what he modified, he proposed modified cell theory. So what modified? He has given the statement. So he used one phrase, that phrase omnis cellula e cellula. This phrase used by Rudolf Virchow. According to this phrase, omnicellula e cellula, cells are formed from pre-existing cells. That statement given by Rudolf Virchow, cells are formed from pre-existing cells. So that is the meaning for omnis cellula e cellula. Again, in the modified cell theory, Rudolf Virchow also used the normal cell theory statements, all the properties whatever proposed by Slide and Swan. Cell is basic unit, structural unit, and functional unit of all living beings. But extra one point that is added by Rudolf Virchow, that is cells are formed from pre-existing cells. So for example, you take one cell here, this cell it produces cells, new daughter cells. Like this here, once if you take how these two cells form, these two cells are formed from this cell. How this cell is formed? This cell is formed from pre-existing cells. So everywhere you can observe pre-existing cells. These two cells are formed from pre-existing cell. This cell is formed from pre-existing cell. This cell it is formed in the ocean. So origin of life, one single prokaryotic organism is formed in the ocean. But cells arises from pre-existing cells. That statement given by Rudolf Virchow. But he used one phrase, that is omnicellula e cellula. The meaning of this omnicellula e cellula, cells are formed from pre-existing cells. But here Rudolf Virchow proposed so more modified cell theory. You can say here modern cell theory. So here modern cell theory So there are different technical terms used by the scientists here. For Rudolf Virchow theory, we can say modern cell theory, that is proposed by Rudolf Virchow. Next, this theory, whatever proposed by Rudolf Virchow, that theory also called cell lineage theory. So it is otherwise known as cell inheritance theory. So like this, different names given by different scientists for modern cell theory. So Rudolf Virchow cell theory, that is otherwise known as modern cell theory, or cell lineage theory, or cell inheritance theory. This is the information about